Welcome to Pinsari Basketball Live. I promise you this is going to be, at least in my intention right now, the best live in our channel's history. Why am I doing it at 3:28 a.m.? I don't know. This is when I wanted to do it. We're going to be talking about the 3-year vision for this roster. There are a lot of young players on this roster that clearly this management team believes in, and I want to take you through what I think they could be, what maybe we're not seeing right now. We're going to look at advanced stats, and we're going to look at why the way the casual fan thinks and how general managers and scouts think is so different. I'm going to tell you why that is. I'm going to tell you why that gap exists. And we're going to look into what advanced stats can't tell us, what the eye test can't tell us. Been on a bit of a rant for most of the day about this. We're going to revisit the 2021 NBA draft, a draft that was, called generational, the best draft since 2003. It hasn't been. There are some players who are really doing well, and then there are some players who are really not doing well. And I think you'll be surprised who's who. And we're going to look at the three things Scottie, this Darko Rajakovic quote about Scottie Barnes learning 3 things that he needs to be good at has polarized a lot of fans. Some fans saying, yep, and some fans saying, no, don't limit him. I am very, very much in camp Darko on this one, and I want to explain why. Tony Horvat and I dug into it in the last live, but I don't expect a lot of people to dig through 3.5 hours for that. So I wanted to present my case for why this needs to be and why I think the Raptors have a really, really good plan for not only Scottie, but also OG, Precious, Christian Koloko, Gradey Dick, Malachi Flynn, etc. We're gonna hit that intro. I want to thank you all, Sean S over here, and finally at the end of this live, I'm going to share a little bit about who I am and why I am the way I am. Weird, good, bad, all of it. And I'm going to share a very nice message from a very special person who sent me a very nice message on Instagram, and how it is really it really shaped my day. And I want to share that message because I think when I read it to my girlfriend, she was just like, wow, like this person has hit it. And I completely agree. So I want to share that message without naming names. And hopefully it'll help you understand a little bit about why this community is the way it is and seen the way it is too. All right, let's hit that intro. Oh, by the way, I did sleep. Because of that message, I slept a lot today. I've been underslept for about 5 months straight. And I think it has drastically altered or perhaps hindered the quality of some of these lives. Being sleep deprived chronically is akin to being drunk. So yeah, you can say I did the last 5 months drunk, but no more. I slept a lot and I'm wide awake and I got my coffee. And if you're catching this in the morning, grab your coffee too, and let's get to it. All right, so let's talk about it. So Tony Horvat came on in the last live, and we talked about Precious Achiuwa and what we're seeing from him. We also talked a little bit about OG Anunoby. I think the last game was a really great indicator of some of the things that they talked about in the offseason, why Darko Rajakovic is here, and why this entire coaching staff is so development oriented. I think the big beef with Nick Nurse last year and the year before was that these young players that this team really believes in from a scouting perspective just weren't blossoming. They weren't in an environment that allowed them to grow. I want you to imagine that you got a bunch of seeds. They're really expensive seeds. They're supposed to turn into something, and then you put them into soil that is tainted. It does not grow. It does not matter the quality of the seed. If the soil, the manure, whatever, I don't know a lot about gardening, is not adequately prepped, then your seeds will never grow. If you don't water it, the seeds won't grow. And in Darko Rajakovic, you have a person who is breathing confidence into his young players, living through their mistakes. This is a really important thing. We don't have a draft pick. We can't do what the Pistons are doing right now and put out this sorry roster. And so we have to find a way to actually develop and win. And the problem when you aim in two places is it really depends on which one your priority really is. It felt last year that the priority became winning. And while there's a right way to win and a wrong way to win, I think the Raptors won the wrong way a lot last year. One of the things that Tony and I talked about was OG Anunoby, one of my favorite players for the last 5 years. And I felt that his development curve was massively compromised because of what the Raptors needed him to do rather than what he needed himself to do. And this is very important to realize that while Pascal Siakam's massive development curves came via bench units, G League stints, as a first option when he didn't really have the skills to be a first option. We lived through it. OG Anunoby has always just been a bit of a workhorse for the Raptors offense. He missed 2 very critical years of his development curve. And I think this is also very important. And right now, what the Raptors are trying to do is reclaim growth. It's a very hard thing to do. Players, it is possible, however. It is fully possible. Players who, between the ages of 16 and 25, have endless stints of being benched, injuries, being improperly used in the wrong position, their development curve can be massively disrupted. You imagine a player, for instance, who is 6'7", 6'8", whose long-term potential is as a guard or a wing in the NBA, but his high school team uses him as a center. This can massively disrupt what that player can be in the long term. It can be helpful to learn a different position on the court, but at the same time, between the ages, especially between the ages of 6 and 25, but more specifically, organized basketball 16 and 25, this is where you have to really define who you're going to be as a player. And I think when the Raptors drafted OG Anunoby, there was a need. They were really in need of someone who could do something to stop LeBron James. CJ Miles and DeMar DeRozan were not it. And so he kind of became this 3-and-D stopper. And this is sort of the Kawhi path, right? This is the Paul George path. But for some reason, whatever reason, between the injury at Indiana and then inevitably what would happen throughout his Raptors tenure being used more as a role player, fifth option in the first unit, whereby, consider the alternative, Pascal Siakam kind of got to be the man on the second unit with Fred VanVleet. And you can see how that unit allowed him to develop. I think it's very important to realize that in 2017, if you had asked an average Raptor fan which of these two prospects had the brighter future, it wasn't even close. And that is because as prospects, they are not even close. If you take them as a snapshot of when they were drafted, the day they were drafted, OG was younger. He was much better. He was a lottery talent who fell to you at 23. Pascal was a second-round prospect that you reached for at 27, and a lot of fans were really upset. And I think the development of Pascal Siakam is brilliant. It is a brilliant extraction of the 99.9th percentile outcome. But I think OG remains kind of in the 95th percentile outcome. And right now, if you could get him to the 99th percentile, you really are talking about a top 25 player in the NBA, a real top 20 player in the NBA maybe. And to those fans who often complain that he thinks he needs too much usage, and then they look at his isolation stats, I think it's really important to realize that there's a reason he believes that, because he does deserve those reps and because he was deprived those reps earlier on. He missed a ton of time during the Tampa season where he would have been able to develop. There have been stints where Siakam's been injured, where OG has been allowed to be the second or third option, and it's looked good, and sometimes it's looked bad. But this year, I think the goal is to elevate him to, at the very least, a third option and to see how he sinks or swims. And against Detroit, I saw a lot of things that I really liked. Similar thing with Precious Achiuwa. So Tony brought up this comparison to Precious Achiuwa that I hadn't really thought of, but when he said it, I couldn't stop thinking about it. and that was Aaron Gordon. I think it's a great comparison. See, Precious Achiuwa is also a lottery level talent. He may not be a lottery level player. He may not have lottery level basketball IQ, but man, this is the type of guy that teams used to draft top 5, top 7, top 8 all the time before they figured out what they were doing. I think the Raptors were banking on their development team being able to extract something out of Precious Achiuwa. And again, last game and the game before, the Celtics game, and also the Detroit game, I think I saw something from Precious Achiuwa that I haven't seen in a really long time, which is genuine point forward skills. He is an excellent rebounder. He is potentially the best athlete. He's definitely the best athlete on your team. He has transition game. He could potentially develop as a shooter. There's a lot of potential. The goal here is to develop this player because you've spent 2 years, you've given him minutes when there were guys behind him who could help you win more. And we have seen flashes. Sometimes those flashes have been sustained for 3 months where Precious Achiuwa has been really good. I think in Malachi Flynn, you have a backup guard, hopefully a good one. His jump shot is smooth. Sometimes it goes in, sometimes it doesn't go in. Sometimes he's going to shoot 43% for an entire month. Sometimes he's going to shoot 27% for an entire month. He's pesky defensively. I have a lot of faith in Malachi. I had a lot of faith in Malachi as a defender when he came out of college, out of San Diego State. But man, in the NBA, it seems like a lot of that defensive intensity and focus and confidence was just gone. He was struggling hard, but he's still 24, 25 years old, and he's still a player who can hopefully turn around his career. And I think he's shown glimpses of that this year. Gradey Dick is struggling hard, right? He's got a box plus minus somewhere in like the -9 range. It's been tough. I did an entire live based on why you shouldn't lose faith in Gradey, how a lot of shooters, a lot of young players, especially those who are, let's say, athletically or strength-wise a little bit underdeveloped, have struggled like Gradey is. And I think he really could be, Tyler Hero plus for you. I think he could be even more than that, quite frankly. And I really trust his development staff with Darko Rajakovic and Jama Malalela to really bring out the best in him, whatever that is. And I have a feeling that when we look back on this in 2 to 3 years, the people who are saying that he's a bust or that you should have picked Keontae George or Jordan Hawkins, even as much as I love Jordan Hawkins, I think the 99.9th percentile outcome for Gradey Dick is so much higher than people realize right now. There's so many good things this guy can do. And I think when you look back on it in a few years, some of these takes are going to look really funny and really stupid. But nevertheless, the analytics are not on his side right now. The eye test is really not on his side. But there's a theoretical potential with Gradey Dick in terms of his size, his shooting, his stroke, that really, really makes you think if it comes together for this guy, he really could be like a 23, 24 point per game scorer. What could he be? I don't know. Somewhere between a Michael Porter Jr. and a Tyler Hero combo, something like that. So Michael Porter Jr. gets that shooting, but like a movement shooter like Tyler Hero. I don't know, a little bit of Kevin Huerter. It's a hell of a player. Whatever it is, it's a hell of a player because he's a lot bigger than Tyler Hero, right? You often see Tyler Hero play basketball, and you see him with his 6'4", 6'3" wingspan, and you see him getting space with his handle, and you're just like, man, if that guy was 4 or 5 inches taller, he would be all NBA. Like, the potential is immense here. There's a reason he was mocked top 10 by a lot of people. In fact, he was mocked as high as top 7 by a lot of people. He is a lottery talent. So I've defined a lot of lottery talents. Malachi Flynn kind of excluded. Then there's one of my favorite young players, Christian Koloko. Man, if this guy can get back, I hope this respiratory thing goes away. I hope that he's fine. I hope that his health is good because there's really very few prospects, center prospects in the NBA that I have more faith in long-term than Christian Koloko. His short roll potential is something that I have waxed poetic about for hours on this channel, and I'm sure I'll continue to throughout the years. His shot blocking is incredible. His hand-eye coordination is freaking awesome. His lateral quickness for a guy that size, his wingspan, 7'5" wingspan, immense. It is really his shooting stroke that separates him from other center prospects like Mark Williams and Jalen Duren, both of whom are fantastic, who I like a lot. His stroke is awesome. It's something that he's worked at a lot. He is a hardworking, good dude, right? Like a really, really good person that you really want to have in your system. Again, I touch wood that he is okay, because I think that if he is okay, he will be a top 10 center in the NBA by the time he's 26 or 27 years old. His two-way potential is immense. Last year, he struggled because they threw a very underdeveloped center with a high center of gravity up against starting units and threw him to the wolves. And he was competent. Offensively, he was inept, but man, defensively, he was competent. And if he just had that stroke where it is today, like last year, man, you would have seen a starting center. You would have seen no need to trade for a Jakob Poeltl. Also, I think playing behind a Jakob Poeltl is largely something that goes understated, how much that can help a guy like Christian Koloko. Jakob does so many things that Christian does, except Christian's a better athlete. He's a, better transition player, and he's also a better shooter. But like, a lot of people, myself included, were very critical of the Jakob Poeltl trade. And I remember thinking about it at the time, thinking, oh my God, this worsens our draft odds and blah, blah, blah. But if the Raptors really, really saw something in Christian Koloko and they think that they have, a Pascal Siakam level prospect at the 33rd overall pick, and trust me, if the Raptors don't pick Pascal Siakam in 27, he's there at 33 in the 2016 draft as well. So, or 2017 draft. So don't get it twisted. Don't write off a guy because he's the 33rd overall pick. This was definitely a first round talent. GMs just don't like centers these days who apparently can't shoot. His college analytics suggested he can't shoot, but his private workouts suggest he can absolutely shoot. And his growth and development as a shooter at 7 feet tall with a 7'5" wingspan, man, you should be very excited about this young player. All right. Sean saying the lack of updates on Koloko doesn't give me much hope for the season, unfortunately. Well, the lack of update could be a both positive thing and a negative thing, because, if there was a he's out for the season type of thing, you probably would have heard it by now. So up in the air, we'll see. NBA teams are sometimes overly cautious when it comes to health ailments, blood clots, things of that nature, lung problems, asthma. There's a lot of things, because nobody ever wants to see somebody pass out on the court and be pulled out on a stretcher. It is so devastating, and touch wood, that would never happen. But Christian has been with the team. And, if what is happening with Chet Holmgren this year is any indication of how much a player can learn when they are engaged with the right coaching staff, very important. The Thunder did not put Chet Holmgren in street clothes and say, take a year off. They developed him all last year. The work that is paying off this year, I will show you, how good he's been. It's been incredible. So hopefully this off year for Christian Koloko can be a development year as well. Maybe he comes back, maybe he doesn't. Hopefully this resolves itself. I am praying every day. Every time I've gone to church, there's always been a prayer set out for Christian Koloko. So I hope he's good. Okay. Now, is there a young player that I haven't talked about? Hang on. I got to check the graphic. No, I covered all 6 of them. Perfecto. Okay, let's move on. Nice and organized. Okay, advanced stats. For this one, I got to pull up a message, a DM. And I hope this person does not mind that I'm reading this. I will not mention their name, but it was so impressively well laid out that I can't not say it. Like, I'm not giving a shout out here. I guess what I want to say is thank you to the person who wrote this, because it was very important for me to hear it this way. Okay, let me read it out. I really like your show. To help you out, make a low-light film of you saying things that Scottie needs to improve on, or the dog shit he's played, etc. People forget that you actually do praise him when it's warranted, and you offer criticism when it's warranted. You will not win this battle. You will drive yourself nuts. Just make the video and say, I'm done with the narrative. This is very true. I have been very critical of Scottie this year. His passing, his, a lot of things. But people will still remember he's going to be a superstar. Well, guess what? He is a superstar. Anyways, going on. I am done with the narrative. Then don't bait into all-night Twitter wars. You are arguing against people that don't understand the facts as you do. So it's not an even playing field. Then there's a personal bit that I won't include, but then the quote was, Basically, you're not going to win a battle fighting against somebody when you're battling things because you are both arguing your truths. Whether one is factually relevant or not does not matter. Sometimes the win is to let go. Okay. This was important. Scottie's analytics, top 6 box plus minus, does not translate to the eye test of a random fan. He does such subtle things, and the box score sometimes reflects it, but sometimes it does not. Last night's game, I thought Scottie was in the background, much like OG usually is. Then I saw his stats. I thought, when in the game did he get all of that? Like I often think when I see OG at the end of the night. So it's so subtle and within the flow that you may not notice. Siakam stops the flow and he dribbles, so you notice. I hope this makes sense. Save your space for people who can play at your level. I cannot play at your level because I don't think the same way, but I can see your level later through your eyes and your analysis. My favorite Raptor to watch is Chris Boucher. As an old national level swimmer, I appreciate sports at a high level. I also appreciate joy and energy and all-out effort. He may be my favorite. He is my favorite because he outtries everyone. No doubt. Chris Boucher, effort, 10,000%. Anyways, go sleep more. You look more and more tired. Also, maybe you have a friend that can dumb down your thoughts a little bit for the masses. Your podcast was the highlight of the year last season. I thought I was alone in my dislike for Fred until you opened your mouth and spoke my truth. It was easy to believe you and understand you. I really hope we can bring the Raptors back to glory. Also, we love underdogs. Remind people that Scottie is one. He came from a state that is not a place for basketball. He played behind all those talents in the background. He chose a university that allowed him to bet on his skills. He could have gone to Duke or somewhere else and been number one. I like you and your lives. I don't want to see you. I don't want to see my friend crash and burn. It's 82 games, buddy. Love yourself and we will help take care of you. This is the nicest thing, I think. I don't know. I have relatives that I don't think have given me so much in one string of texts. So to you, thank you. This was so important for me. I can't even tell you. I thought about what you said pretty much all day, and it is really the reason for this live. So let's get on with it. Hold on, let me hear some comments here. Morning espresso. Yeah. Okay. Okay, let's get to this. Okay, so the next part, advanced stats and why they don't match the eye test. Man, this is so important. Okay, let's get to it. I spent a lot of time on Twitter, Twitter and Instagram today, just kind of trying to talk and understand how people see things and why they're not matching up. So for this part, I'm going to read what I wrote instead, and I'm going to just show you the graphics so that we can hopefully understand where this is all coming from. Okay, so let's start here. So I think, thanks, Del. Appreciate it, man. So I think Rudy Gay is a perfect example of what our eyes see versus what the analytics see. There are things that our eyes like to see in a hooper. It's superstar-like qualities, midi pull-ups, shifty crossovers, smooth turnarounds, little shake shimmy. We love dunks. We really love dunks over people. We like step back threes. And man, we love players who just look good playing basketball. I think there's a reason why, everyone was hyping up Scottie after the San Antonio game. It was high pressure. There was step back threes. That's not really what he's known for. But for one game, he kind of looked like a superstar. You'd be surprised to know San Antonio was actually his third best game on the season. But we'll talk about that later. But our eyes are really bad at tracking misses, makes, viewing off-ball things, understanding defense, lineup synergy. We just watch the ball. So a step back three off a crossover where the defender falls and the guy holds the follow through and talks shit to the bench, that's superstar shit. But when OG Anunoby quietly drills 4 threes in a corner with no fanfare, that's just subtle. Analytics don't care that your shot looks funky, that you look good, that your handle is smooth. Analytics care if your shot goes in. But without a broad understanding of the game, in the wrong hands, advanced stats are a kryptonite of teams. This is the Daryl Morey problem, and also the Sam Hinkie problem. I could also add Brian Colangelo into this. They can't see the things beyond numbers, and basketball isn't played on an Excel sheet. There's things that analytics miss, and I feel admitting this allows people to completely swear off of analytics. It's not so black and white. Okay. So consider Sam Hinkie and Daryl Morey. These two have been such a black eye for advanced stats, and yet they're also the poster children for the movement when it comes to basketball. Ironically, the Sixers' last three leaders, including Colangelo, have all been highly educated types with an obsession for Moneyball style management. But there is so much that the numbers still can't figure out. And that's where you need a bit of both. You need a front office that knows that tanking for youth is sometimes good, but also people who understand that youth needs to be balanced with veterans who can help them develop. It's not enough to just field an AAU team on an NBA court. Sam Hinkie drafted both well and unwell. So did Colangelo. So did Daryl Morey. He had some major hits and some major misses, but in the end, team success in all cases is hinged on the gaps in knowledge these two simply lacked, from understanding people to understanding basketball on the court and beyond the spreadsheets. Okay. Okay, that may not be the best thing for now. Hang on. This one. So I've talked about Cade a lot because he's the most glaring example of why advanced stats are so useful in weeding out fake stars. It's impossible to watch Cade play and not be dazzled by his game. I've watched him play for 6 years now, and I get it. The Luka comps have always been there since Montverde. His game actually before Montverde. It was there in Texas as well. His game is smooth. It doesn't have hitches. In theory, this is a guy who should be everything Luka is. So why isn't he? Looking like Luka doesn't make you Luka because Luka is threading the 99.999th percentile of what a 6'6" ball dominant, slow-footed athlete can do. And being in the 98.9th percentile of that group will make you a fairly awful player. The gap is so much bigger than the fall off from Steph to Trae Young or from MJ to Kobe. The analytics hate Cade because he's turnover prone. He has a bad shot diet of middies. He's not efficient. He's very ball dominant. And generally speaking, everything you think he does well is being massively overshadowed by something he does poorly. So he has some nice passes, but he turns the ball over a lot. He scores a lot of points, but he misses a lot of shots. The Pistons have a vision of making this guy into Doncic 2.0, but Luka processed the game at 16 better than Cade does at 22, and this isn't a cap that you can just make up. Now here comes the Chet Holmgren part of this. I have been dazzled by Chet Holmgren so far. This is Chet's shot chart. Okay. Now, a lot of people, by the way, like the analytics on this are conclusive. Chet is by far going to win Rookie of the Year if he stays healthy. But why do the betters still favor Tyrese Maxey for most improved over Scottie Barnes when he's been better? And why do why do the betters still technically, prefer Wembanyama over Chet? Well, that's because they understand that the voters are human and the humans are missing things. Wembanyama has 8 blocks. It's a really big deal. But then he has a complete stinker the next night, and it's not as big a deal because we don't focus on it. So add in a stellar dose. This is Chet's shot chart on the right. By the way, this is elite. This is like some KD in year 3 type of shit. Okay. Add in a stellar dose of defense, low turnovers because he totally plays within himself and he never tries to do stupid things that most young players do. And you actually don't even need advanced stats to tell you that he's freaking incredible. There's a human bias, okay? Racial, cultural, aesthetic bias. Regardless of if you're gay or straight, the way a player dresses, talks, looks, their name, all subconsciously taint your perspective of how you see them when they're playing basketball. But the advanced box score does not give a shit, okay? I'll try to be a little bit more interactive because this is a little bit of a later live. So, agreed. No, he was not. That would be insane. At 16, no. He was the EuroLeague rising star. I don't remember when he won rising star. That could be interesting. Okay, let's take a look at some advanced stats. So look, after last game, if you looked at the raw box score, you probably thought that Dennis Schroeder and Pascal Siakam were the best players. And you probably thought OG was pretty bad. And you probably thought Jakob and Scottie were just kind of there. So I want to show you the advanced stats from the Detroit game. Okay. These are the advanced stats from the Detroit game. And this is kind of, what I would say the average person doesn't see. So just to point out, Cade Cunningham was the second best player in the starting lineup. That tracks my eye test. I thought Isaiah Stewart was the best player in the starting lineup, and he was. And I thought Cade played an above average game. I thought Jaden Ivey, Asar Thompson, and Kevin Knox played below average games, and they did.
Azar is generally a negative 0.5 box plus minus guy. He had a negative 7.7 game. That is unusually bad for him. Jaden Ivey is kind of like a negative 1 box plus minus guy. He was negative 8.7 or negative 8.4. That kind of like tracks, he played pretty poorly. He shot the ball poorly. He defended poorly. So it makes sense. It makes sense, right? But look at the usage, right? Cade's usage is 33%. This is an average game for Cade. This is pretty much how he plays all the time. Low true shooting, high turnovers. Well, I mean, this was actually one of his less turnover prone games. 14% is nowhere near the 18% that he posts on a regular basis. 33% is pretty close to his usage, and negative 5.9 is right in line with where he's been all season. He's been the worst starter for the Pistons for the most part, and it's not even close. So how is the guy who's averaging 23 points the worst starter? Well, it's because of how he does it, right? Now look at the Raptors side, right? And you probably assume that Dennis Schroeder had this big flashy game. He shot the ball pretty well. He had a lot of assists. Why is he negative 0.6? Because he is having a terrible game. He is making mistakes everywhere. He is not milking advantages in transition. He's taking bad shots. He's registering bad shots. He's making assists that are missing open guys. And when you do enough of these things, your analytics will reflect it, even your box score does not. Look at OG Anunoby. OG Anunoby had a really tough game. He's been a positive 2 box plus minus guy. He had his worst game of the season, negative 11.4. This was terrible. How was he so bad? He missed a lot of shots. Yep. Didn't create a lot. Yep. Didn't rebound incredibly well. Yep. Everything that you could imagine for a bad game. He had a terrible game. The best player for the Raptors, Jakob Poeltl. People will have a really tough time understanding that. How was Jakob Poeltl the best player? Well, defensively, he was incredible. He didn't turn the ball over a lot he was incredibly low usage. He made his impact incredibly well on the glass. He blocked shots. He did everything. I mean, what more could you have possibly wanted? Now, does that mean that Jakob Poeltl is a better player than Pascal Siakam? Well, tonight he was. You have to just register that, and you have to live with it and smoke it. The analytics don't care about your feelings here, right? Jalen McDaniel is a negative 13. No surprise. He's been terrible all year. But Gradey Dick, negative 3.6. This was one of his better games. This was one of his better games because you know what? The analytics care that he made 2 out of 3 of his shots. The analytics care that, for instance, Chris Boucher was the 3rd best player tonight or last night. 9.8. He was great. You heard me in the post game praise Scottie, Jakob, and Chris Boucher. I gave Scottie the player of the game because I think his first half contribution was incredible. But I do want you to understand box plus minus is a full game thing, right? Scottie's first half was like plus 18, plus 17. Fact check me on it. Guaranteed. It was incredible. His gamesmanship, his stats sunk in the second half because he didn't play very well in the second half. But the game was over. The game was over at the end of at the middle of the second quarter. So basically, let's get back to this. Where is this? Here we go. So here are the top players in the NBA per box plus minus. We can stop talking about small sample biases. It's for real. This one goes out to Josh Lewinberg, who continues to peddle his 13-game Bargnani. Let's be careful. Well, we're now 13 games of Scottie Barnes, and 13 games Scottie Barnes is actually better than like almost every single Raptor in Raptor history, other than maybe Kawhi and Vince, right? Like this is some crazy stuff. So how is he doing it? First of all, I want to say something. His stats are actually low compared to who he is as a player. And I'll explain why. Now you're saying, Rob, are you saying that Scottie Barnes is not only overperforming as the 9th best player in the NBA, but you think he's better than the 9th best player in the NBA? Yeah, I would actually say that he's much, much closer to Steph Curry than Luka Doncic right now. And I'll tell you why. His stats are super misleading. By my calculations on how space and roster construction and lineup data actually impacts individual analytics, Scottie's actually much closer to a 9.3 to 9.7 box plus minus player right now. I don't think people understand how good he actually is or how good he eventually could be, but 12 to 13 box plus minus and 7.5 estimated plus minus seasons are very much in the cards if he keeps developing and staying healthy. Someone once said when I said he was a superstar last year while he's averaging 15 points, that I was trying to, quote, will wishes into existence, end quote. That somehow if I kept saying something over and over again, I would magically speak it into existence. And I remember laughing in my own head thinking, I think he says the word great 30 times a day. He's willing this into existence all by himself. Inside the math, this is worth a read, and I guess worth a listen. Lineups are not equal. Playing with Jokic makes you a better shooter, and the value of your play is attributed to both you, the shooter, and him, the creator. If you put Nikola Jokic with G League players, his value would stay relatively around the same to the players on his team, but would plummet relative to players around the league who played with better teammates. Okay, so if Jokic is plus 14 right now, which he is, to the players around him who are plus 4, plus 5, then with G League players, the values would fall between plus 8 and plus 2. The ratios would stay roughly in line, but he'd still be by far the best player. Scottie's high moments this year are truly spooky. Okay, we're talking first half against Detroit, which was last game. Second half versus San Antonio, that was the game winner and all that stuff that he did. First half versus Philly, and the second half versus Milwaukee both times. The game score doesn't tell the full story. When you start to break it down into quarters where the pieces around him were optimized and the score mattered, you start to feel the true impact of a guy who's flashing 13 to 15 box plus minus on a regular basis at 22. To be clear, as a bit of a Jokic superfan, given that he is from my country, who watched his greatness from a young age as well, Jokic was not this good in year 3. The numbers overall were very close to where Scottie is now, but there were very few, if any, indicators of plus 13, plus 15 type impact for him on sustained stretches against really good teams. His highest highs in year 3 were games against Brooklyn, San Antonio, and Sacramento, where he put up, I think, plus 18 type box plus minus numbers. 3 games where he had this level of, holy shit, this guy's going to be MVP. Scottie's already had those 3 games, and we're like 15 games in, but he didn't do it wire to wire. It was one half, but he did it in the half that mattered more, if that makes sense. So like from the 10-minute mark of the first quarter against Detroit to about the 5-minute mark of the second quarter, he was basically Magic Johnson plus. And I say plus because offensively he was giving you Magic Johnson, but then defensively he was giving you like Scottie Pippen. Okay. And for 9 very important minutes of the game, after which the game was completely over, and he just kind of dialed it back, right? He just let everybody else eat. He got to do whatever, right? So the question becomes, what if the players around him weren't Malachi, Precious, and Boucher, but actually, I don't know, Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, and Michael Porter Jr.? Well, now you're really talking about some GOAT shit, right? Because you take all of the Jokic offense and add defense to it, it really does become some GOAT shit, okay? Let's try to stay on track here. This is a lot of shit to pack into one live, but I'm going to try to keep responding to the questions and, the comments. Hang on. Jose Calderon saying, I think Scottie will be definitely better than anyone on OKC at this time, and Shea will want to come home to raise a family. It'll be a Kawhi situation. Man, that'd be great. It was kind of excited. I was kind of excited for McDaniels when we signed him, but he forgot how to play basketball. Give it some time. But yeah, it has not looked encouraging so far. He won EuroLeague MVP at 18. Correct. It was 18 or 19? 18. Yeah. He won EuroLeague Rising Star, I think, the year before. But yes, he was great. The comparison to Cade was really more like Luka at 15, 16 years old. Like the way he was seeing the game was absolutely like next level. He was ahead of everyone around him. His skill wasn't there. Body wasn't there. Strength wasn't there. The big dude you see today wasn't the guy he was back then. But watching Luka at age 16, he was like ahead mentally of everyone else on the court, or at least on par with like some of the best EuroLeague players. And that's a lot to do. Okay, let's revisit the 2021 draft, because I think this will be a good chance to talk about Scottie, but also about Cade and Evan Mobley, and just why does a stat like value of a replacement, box plus minus, estimated plus minus, etc., why do they value him? First, a really quick look into estimated plus minus. Estimated plus minus sees Scottie as the 5th best player in the NBA. Please look at the names above him. Please look at the names below him. So that is Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, LeBron James, Scottie Barnes. LeBron is having a historic year. Okay, he's shooting the highest he's ever shot. He's been freaking incredible. 67.9% true shooting is absolutely nuts. Like, this is not going to continue, I don't think. But clearly, like, he is absolutely losing his mind. Like, he is 77.8% at the rim. I don't think he's missed. Like, it's been quite incredible. Shooting nearly 40% from the 3-point line, also incredible. Worth noting that among players who have taken at least 63s, this at least before today's games, Scottie is 27th in the NBA or 28th in the NBA in three-point shooting. He leads. I want everyone to see my face when I say this. Scottie is the best three-point shooter right now on the Toronto Raptors. That's crazy. He has attempted as many threes as Dennis Schroeder, and they both lead the Raptors with 66 three-point attempts. That's crazy. He's attempting over 5 a game, and he's shooting them at almost 40%. I mean, if this is not the jump of jumps that gets him most improved player, I don't know what is, because that's just absolutely insane. Behind Scottie are Steph Curry, Tyrese Halliburton, Chet Holmgren. Right, this is some amazing territory for a rookie. I can't remember the last time a rookie was this good. Maybe Tim Duncan. Donovan Mitchell, Jason Tatum, Tyrese Maxey, Kevin Durant, Paul George, Luka Doncic, Devin Booker, Giannis Antetokounmpo. If I asked an average fan which of these names is not like the rest, I think they would say Scottie and Chet, because they seem like they don't belong on this list. They definitely don't seem like they belong over Kevin Durant and Luka Doncic, but that is why advanced stats are so important, but also worth contextualizing, right? I think that's worth noting. Okay, let's go to the 2021 NBA draft. I think you're going to be very surprised. So this is career value replacement. This is worth noting. This is not saying that Cade Cunningham is the 36th best player in the 2021 NBA draft. Please understand that he is not. And this is not what this is saying. This is also not saying that Cade Cunningham is better than Jonathan Kuminga. This is not saying that Jalen Green is better than Jalen Suggs. What this is, however, saying is that the more you put a negative player on the court, the more negative impact they have. I want you to imagine it like this. Let's say you put a player who's a 30% three-point shooter and a player who's a 40% three-point shooter on the court, right? After an entire season, the 30% three-point shooter will have like a massively negative shooting profile, and the 40% shooter is going to have a massively positive. Now, this checks out statistically. Why would you not want a 40% three-point shooter on your team? Provided to take a high volume of threes, this is a very good player. What team would prefer the 30% three-point shooter? Can you think of one? Nobody in the world would prefer a 30% three-point shooter. So at the end of the year, what you're going to see is 30%, 40%. And our brains are not really good at just being able to synthesize those two numbers and saying that there's a 10% gap. What is a 10% gap? Is it really relevant? So if I give you the following two players, one guy is a 20 point per game scorer who shoots 40% from the field and 30% from three. And the other guy is a 10 point per game scorer, and he shoots 50% from the field and 40% from three. Which of those two players do you think are going to be prioritized? Well, the advanced stats, most likely, if all other things are equal, are going to prioritize the more efficient player. Now, this is where advanced stats are important to be contextualized, right? The guy who's averaging 20 points per game has a harder role on offense, maybe. He's taking a higher volume of attempts, which makes it more difficult because maybe defense is getting up on him. So while partially this can be true, it is not simply enough to say that the guy who's averaging 20 is always going to be better than the guy who's averaging 10, because 20 is higher than 10, because 50 is higher than 40, and 40 is higher than 30 as well. So we need to balance it out with watching. We need to watch. So is the roster around Cade really this bad? No, it's not. But it's a very quick way to excuse the performance so far. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to read out every single player. Well, not every single player. You can read it for yourself. Hopefully you can read most of that. But if you can't, go to Basketball Reference and sort by value of replacement. The top guys in the NBA 2021 NBA draft, which was supposed to be great and generational, has really just produced about 3 guys who are looking great and generational, which is Scottie Barnes, Evan Mobley, and Alperen Sengun. There's I want to say, just based on these numbers, it looks like Scottie, Evan Mobley, and Sengun project to be first team All NBA guys. It's possible that Trey Murphy, Josh Giddey, Franz Wagner end up being All NBA, not All NBA, but All-Star types. Trey Murphy probably a little bit harder because his game is not very self-created. So he might be like a very, very, very elite third starter type of guy, like an OG Anunoby. Josh Giddey and Franz Wagner, it's a lot more self-creation on worse teams. So maybe there's some element of this is where the advanced stats can be a little bit misleading and say, okay, well, if the average person had to choose between Trey Murphy and Franz Wagner, wouldn't you choose Franz Wagner? I think it's close. I think it's a little bit closer than people want to realize because I think Trey Murphy is awesome, one of my favorite young players, but I can see the case for Franz. What I cannot see is the case for Cade. Cade is at 36. Jalen Green is at 43. Jalen Suggs is at 44. You have Chris Duarte, who was picked in the lottery at 49th. You have Zaire Williams at 54th. And Donovan Mitchell, who was one of my least favorite draft picks. And I told Leo when they drafted him, y'all have made a mistake. He's like, you don't know how great he defends. Well, it turns out he doesn't defend great enough because he is the worst player despite being picked, I think, 9th overall. He was picked 9th overall. Yeah. Wow. Okay. 9th, 10th picks have been awful. The 12th pick, Josh Primo, has been awful. Right. Some other worth notings. Delano Banton, our Rexdale boy. He is 30th. Isaiah Livers, 29th. David Johnson, Toronto. He only played 2 minutes, and that's the problem, right? At 0, he made 0 impact. All those 0 guys, you have to weed out guys like Scottie Lewis and maybe guys like, I don't know, Gray and the low minutes guys. I think it can be a little bit misleading if you only played 2-3 minutes. How much value are you going to add or drop? Those 0 guys are a little bit misleading, but typically it's the big minutes, high lottery or first round guys like James Bouknight, right, who's played 819 minutes. Keon Johnson, right? Those guys, those guys are the ones where you can say, okay, this is starting to check out. Josh Christopher, that's another example. -1 value of a replacement. He's played 2,000 minutes. That's a pretty fair sample, right? Josh Primo has played over 1,000 minutes. He's -0.9, -0.8, right? But specifically, the most accurate samples are going to come for guys like, I don't know, Ayo Dosunmu, right? Ayo came out like gangbusters, right? He was the 38th overall pick, and he's -0.3, and he's played, I don't know, a lot of minutes. He's played 4,000 minutes. Wait, is that correct? 4,300 minutes? That can't be correct. It might be 1,300 minutes. He's played a lot of minutes. A lot of these guys have played a lot of minutes, but you look at a guy like Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green, these guys are 5,000 minutes. And in the case of Cade, he's at nearly 3,000 minutes, and he has never posted a single season with positive win shares. He's never posted. It's been negative boxes minus, negative win shares, negative value of replacement every single year. And that's how you get to this, right? That's how you get to -0.2 value of a replacement. And that's crazy. -2.2 boxes minus is average. I mean, he's worse than his career averages across the board. But people are going to look at points per game. People are going to look at assists per game and say he's good. He's not good. He's not very good. He's not a very good player right now. And that is just factual. That's the data. So what is it about Scottie that the analytics like? What is it about Cade that the analytics don't like? I think it's very easy to watch the Detroit Pistons and say Cade has no help. I think it's just like watching the Raptors with Pascal Siakam and saying Pascal didn't have help in Tampa. What's the guy to do, man? We have a subconscious bias towards guys who dribble a lot and do flashy things with the basketball. Pascal Siakam's game may not appeal to most trainers that I've talked to. It may not appeal to most scouts that I've talked to, but man, fans like the spinorama. They like the spins. They like the little step backs. They like the little shit, His game is fluid. It's hitchless, and it looks good to some people, But you don't see all the shots he's missing. You just don't. You don't see the layups. You don't see the passes that he's missing. You don't see the other things. And so it's the same thing with Cade, right? Cade and Pascal are very similar. Actually, I think that Cade Cunningham is a way, way less. This is going to be a very weird comp for Cade Cunningham. Detroit fans are going to hate me even more than they already do. I think he is a way less intelligent, way less impactful, way worse shooting version of Fred VanVleet. All-star version Fred VanVleet, not role player version. He dominates possessions. He takes horrible shots. He doesn't make a lot of them. The difference between Cade and Fred is that Fred's shot quality is better, weirdly enough. And Cade looks 1,000 times better while playing basketball, right? He's longer. He's got the long wingspan. He's taller. He's got the cool name, the cool hair, the cool eyes. Everyone likes watching Cade play basketball. I don't. And I think that it's quite putrid and quite horrible what the Detroit Pistons fan base is having to go through right now, because they have 3 players on their team that I really do like, in Jaden Ivey and Asar Thompson and Jalen Duren. And I think those 3 players make a fantastic young core. I think if you traded Cade Cunningham right now, I think one test that I like to do very often is, what if you swapped this guy for this guy? What would happen? Someone asked me the other day, what if you swapped Cade for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who is a real, star? What would actually happen? Well, everyone would play a lot better. I think the Pistons are probably a 500 team with Shai. I'm not saying they're going to be a championship contender, but they'd be a 500 team right now, which is a far cry from losing 11 straight. I think that Cade is a nice dude. I've read a lot about him. I've followed him for a very long time. I don't mean to make this a Cade thing or a Pascal thing or anything like that. I just have had this thing my whole life about inefficient basketball. I hate it. I hate inefficient basketball. It's not necessarily the players themselves. It's just the brand of basketball and how it's celebrated and elevated above other types of basketball. I like efficient players. I like Herb Jones. I like Trey Murphy. I like Dyson Daniels. I like Jordan Hawkins. These are players that I really like. I know I just named 4 Pelicans, but clearly the Pelicans like them too, right? I like Mark Williams. I do. LaMelo Ball is, playing a lot better this year. Brandon Miller, I wasn't a really huge fan. He's been good so far. I like Chet Holmgren. There are players that I really prefer over other types of players, but there's this one type of player that fans just love. And I think that it is a flawed concept, because I think they love him because he looks like something that they used to remember being great. I'll tell you something. If I was to take Michael Jordan right now and put him on a basketball court, he would still do Jordan-esque things at 50 plus. He would still have Jordan-esque movements, but they would be slower. He would still have the Jordan-esque jump shot. He would still have the Jordan-esque swagger. He would still have the Jordan defensive stance. But everything would be 1,000 times worse. And he would be the worst player, one of the worst players in the NBA right now at 50. I don't know how old he is, 53, 54. He wouldn't be able to get up and down the court properly. His athleticism and burst wouldn't be the same. His elevation on his jump shot wouldn't be the same. His fatigue, conditioning, etc., wouldn't be the same. But for 1 or 2 plays, man, he would look so good. It would look so beautiful, because that part of the game doesn't go away. It's everything else that goes away. I think that we need to start changing the way we talk about basketball, but I don't think I can really address the other side of the aisle before I understand what the other side is thinking, what they're seeing. So I think that's important. Give this video a like if you're someone who's been watching this at a crazy hour of the night and this has been something that you find valuable. It'll hopefully allow more people to watch it in the morning. I think that pretty much covers most of the stuff that I really wanted to talk about today. 3 things Scottie, and then a bit about me will be the closing of this live, and hopefully we can keep this pretty short. Darko Rajakovic broke a lot of people's brains by saying that Scottie Barnes needs to get really good at 3 things. I want to flash again Chet Holmgren's chart here. This is a player who's really good at 2 things right now. He needs to find the 3rd thing he's really good at, but this is the idea. If you really look at most great players, and I mentioned this in the last live as well, they're not good at 50 things. I mean, they're good at 50 things. They're not great at 50 things. They're not great at 20 things. Nikola Jokic is not great at 20 things. He's great at 3 things. Most great players are great at 2 or 3 things. It has always been this way. And you can go back to Dr. J, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. They have go-tos. They have spots. What you want to do, because everyone has 24 hours a day. Everyone has only so much development time. Everyone is going to develop on a certain curve. We looked at the value for replacement peaks for a lot of players. Trust me, they're all 24, 25, 26. What you want to do is you want to time out your skills peak with your athletic peak. You don't want to be peaking on your skills at 33 and your athleticism peaked at 25. This is not the greatest way to maximize a basketball career. Can you imagine if DeMar DeRozan was this skilled at 20? He would be a future Hall of Famer, de facto future Hall of Famer. He might have been an MVP. If he was this skilled at 20, he might have been an MVP type. DeMar's game grew on like a really weird curve where his skill work kept getting better and better and better and better and better in some of the wrong directions, to be honest. Like the 3-point shot would have really helped. But can you imagine if he had this skill at 20 when he still had his incredible athleticism, which started to decline around 24, 25? Can you imagine what that player would have been like from the ages of 21 to 23, 24? See, DeMar was a guy who managed to do a lot of things. He tried to develop as a passer. He tried to develop as a post scorer and a pull-up jump shooter. He tried to do so many things, you know? And over some period of time, he found his spots. But I think for Scottie, the development curve has to be such. He's always going to be a pretty good at a lot of things guy. The skill work is there. I mentioned yesterday that it was like building a 2K player who's 72 at everything. That's a pretty good player. It's a very useful player. He can hit threes, but he can't like hit 10 threes, right? He can hit free throws, but he's probably never going to go 100% from the line if he has 10 attempts. He can hit some post shots, but they're not as effective as like the best post scorers. He can do pick and roll, but he's like 76th percentile. You know, as a pick and roll ball handler, he's like 74th percentile. That's pretty much the Scottie game right now. Everything is kind of in the 50th to 80th percentile. Everything from pick and roll ball handling to jump shooting to 3-point shooting to 3-point volume to volume of attempts to rim percentages. Everything is in that range. He's not awful at anything. Scottie Barnes is not awful at anything on the basketball court right now. It's actually a pretty impressive thing. Most young players are really awful at some things. You know, Trae Young is awful at defense. Jalen Green is awful at defense. There are guys who just don't finish well. Cade is awful at almost everything right now, right? Except for ball handling. He's awful with the turnovers. He's awful at advantage creation. He's awful at his percentages at the rim. He's kind of awful with he's awful at a lot of things. Scottie's not really awful at anything. He's not overly turnover prone. His rim percentages are decent. His mid-range percentages are decent. His 3-point percentages are decent. His self-creation is okay. You know, some of the isolation stuff, maybe it's a little bit low, but he's not really going to be he's not going to be Michael Jordan, right? In terms of isolation scoring. So that's not really his game. But now we need to bring 3 things into the 99th percentile. What are those 3 things going to be? We need to figure it out. Is he going to become a 99th percentile pick and roll ball handler? Can we get that? Because right now he's like 76th percentile. Can we get 76th percentile to 90th percentile by the end of the year as a pick and roll ball handler? Get him enough reps, get him enough time, enough guidance, watch enough film with him to make that one thing bread and butter go to. Okay? Pick and roll ball handler. You know what's going to happen? He's going to do it with Jakob, who can't shoot. And then like a year from now, that skill is going to go from 90th percentile to 97th percentile. And Jakob is going to be swapped out for a guy who can shoot. And you're going to have an unstoppable offense around this one skill that is better than 98% of the league. He needs to get there. What about spot up shooting? As a big shooter who is evolving rapidly as a shooter over the last 3 years, can we get him into the 93rd percentile as a spot up shooter? Is that possible? Certainly, it is possible. With enough hard work, enough reps, he can get there. Now, what about post isolation, pinch post isolation, post hub type of play? Now, I want you to imagine the player that I just described, okay? Imagine that he is in that area of the pinch post on either side, going either way, counter either way. We're talking like you can stop shop Scottie Barnes in the post about 18 feet to 17 feet away from the basket. If it is a small defender, we're going to back down until the defense collapses. If it's a big defender, we're going to square up and go right past them. Okay. In this area of the court, his playmaking is going to be elitely unlocked. You can see all four of his teammates, all 5 defenders. He can attack advantages. He can find corner shooters. You can run plays away on the empty side, or if he's isolated on the empty side, then you can find guys coming over towards him for dribble handoffs. All sorts of actions can be made possible through this. Plays away from the basketball, players like Precious Achua, Christian Koloko, OG Anunoby, Gradey Dick, etc. These guys all factor in. Okay, even a guy like Gary Trent Jr., who right now can masquerade for some of that, can factor in. Imagine that he is unstoppable in this area of the court. Do you just try to dream what that could look like? Because it could look freaking unstoppable. It is the superstar territory of the court. It is the place that Michael, Kobe, etc. have operated from. It is the place where Pascal Siakam currently operates from. It is the area of the court where you can best see advantages, disadvantages, etc. You want to put your best scorers and your best decision makers in this area of the court. But what happens when you put truly elite players at this area of the court? Well, what happens for the Dallas Mavericks offense? What happens for, the Thunder offense with Kevin Durant? This is where stars operate. So you need to get him super comfortable on both sides of the court, shifting around. If you imagine the entire court, just draw a line between the three-point line and the free throw line, and I want him to be able to operate in all those areas. Mid-post, kind of like high post, pinch post, like right above the key, right below the three-point line, etc. He's going to have so many advantages here. He's huge. He can see over most guards, most wings. He'll always be able to see passes, cutters, etc. He's also got some post finishing ability and some driving ability, some quickness advantage. He can do that. He can always bully ball his way into more favorable, area of the court. Then he just rises over and shoots. He's working on that midi post, mid turnaround. Man, this guy could be unstoppable. Like, we're talking, if you don't double, 45 points anytime he wants. He doesn't even need to go to the pick and roll ball handling or the spot up shooting. He just do the same thing over and over until they stop you. The spot up shooting is as a secondary player. What happens when you start getting blitzed and double teamed in the post every time? Now you got to go to something else. Well, okay, it's a very smart player off the ball. He can find advantages by cutting into space, etc. But okay, maybe there's a game plan which is very much swarming him, and you have an elite defender on the other side. Now you got to go more to your jump shot. You got to go more to your spot up jump shooting. Well, now you're unlocking a completely different area of the court and a completely different style of play. Kawhi can do this, right? If you really think about Kawhi's game, how complicated is it? How complicated is it? It's three things. Kawhi does three things. Jordan does three things. Kobe does three things. KD does three things. You can complicate it more than you want. You can say, oh, well, that's a step back and that's a turnaround. And it's the same thing. It's the same area of the court. Okay. Now expand it further. Now combine all three things. Imagine the player that I'm describing. You have a 6'9" guy with really good athleticism and incredible vision in the center of the court, running a pick and roll with a really good screener who is either an incredible finisher at the rim or an incredible pick and pop partner for Scottie. This is unstoppable shit. He can get right to the rim. There aren't a lot of centers who can stop him when he's going downhill. There aren't guards who can guard him when he's doing a little pull-up. And once he comes off that pick, if the jump shot is real, which I think it is, and we can get this read and react stuff and the handle tight enough, now we are talking about truly a 5-time MVP. It's scary shit because the profile and the mind lend itself to this. I am very happy that he has a coach who sees this, who understands this, because I definitely do understand this. And I think Masai understands this. And I think Brian Macon, his trainer, understands this. You need to get him 3, and then you need to get him 9. What is 9? 9 are the 9 spots. So once you get the 3 skills down, okay, now can you initiate a pick and roll off the left corner? Can you initiate a pick and roll off the right corner? Now, how about above the break? Now, how about at the post? Okay, we need to get you your 9 spots that you can do all these 3 things. Once you get that, it's over. It's over. It's absolutely over. It's curtains for the league. You have one of the greatest players of all time. If he can get these 3 things right. What you don't need, however, is for him to try to become great at like 15 things. Okay, I'm going to work on dribble handoffs right now. I'm going to work on my screen setting right now. No, No. We're going to hone all of our development dollars and hours and time into making you great at these three things. Okay, so hopefully that settles that. I was a little bit long-winded, but I wanted to explain it in a way that hopefully was easy to understand, and I think why Darko is approaching it this way. Finally, a little bit about yours truly, and maybe hopefully this will be an olive branch for people who don't like me, and maybe this will be a bit of an explanation for people who do. So when I was very young, I did not get along with people my own age. I didn't understand them. When I was 5, I didn't understand people who were 5. When I was 7, I didn't understand people who were 7. It's always been this way. When I was 8 years old, they would bring me to a party and sit me with a bunch of 8-year-olds. And there are some people who just are in a rush to grow up, so they want to act adult. I wasn't in a rush to grow up. I wanted to be a kid. I so desperately wanted to be a kid. I wanted to understand what the kids around me were into. I wanted to understand how to relate to them, but I couldn't. I didn't know how to. So I would always find myself talking to someone who was 21 about some philosophy thesis, and I was 8 years old. And you would think that at 8 years old, I had nothing to add or contribute to this, but often the conversation was pretty weirdly balanced, and they would often remark that I was very mature for my age. I didn't want to be mature for my age. I hated it. I got picked on a lot for it. I tested gifted in grade 1. In New Jersey, they do aptitude scores and statewide tests and stuff. In New York, they do this as well. I tested in the 99.99 something percentile. I was top 40. When we moved to Ontario, we did the Gauss exam. I think I was top 40 or 50 in the province. I have been this way my whole life. When I was younger, my response to this was just talk to older people. Go find someone who's 30, 40 when you're 10 and talk to them about their life. It'll make more sense. You'll have more fun. You won't be criticized for being weird. I just wanted to fit in, honestly. In high school, I almost deliberately flunked tests so that I wouldn't get made fun of, and I'd be like able to relate to people who were failing. And I think I did all of this subconsciously. I didn't consciously fail. I just wanted to fit in so badly. And I think one of the biggest things about becoming an adult was I decided I was done trying to fit in. I wanted to just be myself. And it was a really big vote of confidence to myself to kind of own the things about me that make me me. Because, you know, when you're different, people pick on you for being different. When you're tall, people pick on you for being tall. I wasn't tall, right? When you have an accent, people pick on you for having an accent. When you smell different, look different, come from a different country. I have always been out of every group I was ever in. I was always out. I was too white in my group of black friends. I was too Mexican looking for my group of white friends. It was just always this way. I was too mature for my group of friends when I was growing up. And then I was too much of a kid for the group of adults that I could actually relate to. Like, even when I thought that I had found my tribe, every time I did, I would always find some way in which I would be excluded at some point, right? So maybe there were like a whole bunch of teenagers that I would converse with when I was 9 years old, and we would have a great conversation about, you know, the nature of life and existence. And at some point, there was always some sort of comment about like, oh, what do you know? You're 10. And it always made me feel out. So in a lot of ways, I understand. I get it. I have nowhere to hide anymore. I'm 35 years old. I'm going to be 36 next week. And I get it. I don't see what you see. I don't know how to. I've tried to, man. I've tried really hard. One of my biggest goals in life and with this channel is to try and understand how people see the world, because it's really useless to see the world and not be able to explain to other people who see the world how you see the world. It's really hard. And I understand that when the Raptors were winning last year, it was really hard for some people to listen to me criticize the team and say they're winning the wrong way. This is very weird criticism, and it gets a lot of people very angry. And I understood that. But when I was criticizing the team for winning last year, I was criticizing them for how they were winning, and people were trying to criticize me for criticizing a team that was winning. The Raptors lacked a center for years after Marc Gasol. So I understand that when they finally traded for Jakob Poeltl, a lot of people were really, really excited. But I wasn't excited because I felt that they had traded for the wrong center at the wrong time to save a team that wasn't worth saving. And I tried to express these views, and I lost a lot of subscribers for it. A lot of people really hated me for that because they were just overjoyed and I had killed their joy. And I've never understood that. I didn't care. You know, I'll share something with you. So I was did a lot of things in my 20s. One of the things I did was I was a financial advisor. And this means that I would get to help people plan their financial future because I had, a lot of knowledge in this. I have my CFA, and quite frankly, I did a pretty good job of planning mine when I was in my teens. And someone came into my office, and this was a very strange conversation because they showed me their entire financial outlook, and they had a very disproportionately delusional perspective on their financial future. They had a lot of debt, they had a lot of liabilities, they didn't have a ton of assets. Their job was not paying enough. When I looked at their expenses, and if they were even being remotely honest, I was shocked out of my mind. So I looked at the numbers. I didn't look at his face. I didn't care about him. I just looked at the numbers. And I came up with the most daunting outlook for his life that I think he probably ever heard. It shook him out of apathy, and I'm really glad I said it the way I did. But I didn't say it on purpose this way. That's just how my brain worked in that moment. I said, I've got good news and I've got bad news. And he said, what's the good news? And I said, you're going to be fine financially. And he said, what's the bad news? I'm like, you got to die before the age of 67. Because if you live one day past 67, you're going to be broke, penniless, and probably living in a homeless shelter. Blunt, but true. Based on the numbers, it was true. He didn't like that. He thought it was very rude. My boss didn't like that. He thought it was cold and callous. He said, this guy's going to, he's going to fire us. Like, nobody wants to hear something like this. This is very blunt, very rude. And I'm like, but he needed to hear it. I don't understand people. I think that's been very proven. I don't understand people very well. I never have. I'm trying my best. I think I can think of, various examples in my life where my not understanding people has helped me a lot, actually, because I'm not distracted by the bells and whistles too much. I don't concern myself too much with emotions, too much, at least. I try to think rationally in most cases. I'll give you two examples. So one is my friend Bernardo. Bernardo and I met in a first year class at U of T. I was going to major in statistics and philosophy, and Bernardo was planning on majoring in urban development, urbanology. And he wasn't sure at that time what he was doing, and we met in an elective class, which was an urbanization 101 class at U of T. And we became friends, and it was great because it was an introduction into the fraternity and that he was a part of, that I eventually became president of a year later. And it was great. It was a great, friendship to strike up in first year university. I was a bit of a loner. I'm very much an introvert. I prefer to be by myself. If you could put me in a log cabin by myself for 10 years, most people think that's haunting. For me, I'm like, do I have my laptop? Can I write scripts? Great. I'm good. I don't need to be around people to find joy. I do this largely because I want to create a community, because I'm so unfamiliar with this concept of community. But yeah, anyways, long story short, by year 2 or year 3, I was noticing that Bernardo's grades were slipping a lot, that his focus was slipping, that he was all over the place. And one night, it was like 2 or 3 a.m. We had a big kegger party, whatever. And I came out. I remember there was this girl that was in my room, passed out, asleep. She was done for the night. And I guess Bernardo came out because he was sleeping with some girl or whatever, and she was she was asleep for the night. So we ended up going out for a smoke. And I remember having this conversation with him, and he told me later that it changed his life. And we just talked about feeling lost, in our early 20s, just feeling kind of directionless and not knowing what the hell the point of anything was. Like, what is the point of these grades and whatever? And I just kind of confronted him, in that moment. I don't know if he was drunk. I don't know if I was drunk, but like, I confronted him in that moment about, how he needs to pull his shit together, and how I think I said something along the lines of, consider it the next 24 months for the next 2 decades of your family's lineage. Think about that from, you can put this work in now, you can get this done now, and, you can test, and you don't have to then wonder if you're smart. You'll know. Because I think a lot of people, they slack because then they'll have an excuse. I wasn't successful because I didn't work hard. But if you work hard, you have no excuses. You'll know if you're stupid. You'll know if you're unsuccessful. And this sort of challenge to him, I didn't think about it again at all. It was just something that I said off the cuff. I wasn't thinking, just having a smoke and just waxing poetic. And a couple of years later, he told me that conversation was a catalyst for him to move forward with his life. He became so academic, so good. He works, he has an incredible job now. He's working in the field that he works in now. His life is not perfectly solved by any means. No one's life is perfect. My life's not perfect. But I will always remember that moment of just telling someone the truth. I'll tell you another way that analytics can help your life. And I think that this would be a really, really solid parting note for why I think that you should try to be a little bit more data driven, even though you probably have a brain that is very unlike mine and you can actually look into emotions. And that's a beautiful thing. And I partially envy you because I would love to be able to feel my way out of situations instead of overthink my way out of situations a lot of times. But I'll share with you one way that thinking fast and slow, like thinking slow, can help you a little bit. So I want you to imagine that you are a door-to-door salesman, right? I apologize if I've shared this example before, but it's just my go-to when it comes to the analytical approach to life versus sort of the flimsy feel my way out of things. Imagine you're a door-to-door salesman. Nobody likes rejection. I think we can all agree that rejection kind of sucks, whether it's a date, whether it's a divorce, whether it's a relationship. Most of us tend to try to avoid rejection when we can in social situations, professional situations. I can't imagine someone saying like, man, I can't wait to the day I'm fired. But some people do, but it's kind of odd. So you're a door-to-door salesman and you're working on commission and you go to about 20 doors and it's just no, get the hell off my property. I'm not interested. You people should be sued. I can't believe you disrupted my morning. Blah, 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 blah. You get 20 terrible responses. Then you go to 10 more doors and nobody's home. How do you feel when you get to the 31st door is basically your life in a nutshell. How do you feel? Now, if you're like most people, if you get an old person, just imagine that you are selling fitness equipment, okay? You're trying to sell fitness equipment to these people and everyone has shut you out or not been home. You get to the 31st door and an old person answers the door who has no clue what fitness equipment is. They don't have any means of buying fitness equipment. They share all of this with you, but you don't see it. So the conversation goes as follows. Hello, sir. Do you have somebody home who would be interested in fitness equipment? What's fitness equipment? Well, I'm selling this. And 5 minutes in, he lets you know that he's a pensioner with very little disposable income and that he hasn't really been to a gym in about 20 years, but his grandson might be interested in, okay. This is a really, really good time to walk away. You probably should have walked away 4 minutes ago. You know why you're not walking away? You're desperate. You're so desperate. You're so desperate for someone to not slam the door in your face. You're so relieved that someone didn't yell at you that you're going to spend 35 minutes talking to this old man, and you shouldn't. You should have been gone probably within a minute. The minute he told you that he did not have an interest in fitness equipment, the minute he told you all that, right now you two are using each other. He is using you because he is probably old and lonely, and you are using him because you are desperate. And after an hour and a half, he's going to take your card and he's never going to call you again. This is a very, very low value situation in which you are wasting time because you just want a reprise, a break from the rejection. This is why you should never get desperate in life. And this is why analytics help. The analytics will tell you this, that of the 200 doors you knock on, you will make 2 sales. That's it. The success will be knocking on 200 doors, not the 2 sales. 200 doors. Get to 200 doors, put in your best effort, let the rest absolutely take care of itself because the rest is out of your control. Stoic philosophy teaches us that those things, ironically, the Stoics were absolutely analytics driven, man. Because they realized that you should not try to control things that you cannot control. I cannot control whether you like me. I cannot control whether you subscribe, although I hope you do subscribe. I cannot control anything. What I can control, however, is that I am honest, that I am direct, that I put in my best effort, and that's it. I cannot sit here and control how you feel about Pascal Siakam and Scottie Barnes, or whether you see the optimistic, rosy-eyed, view that I have for the Raptors' future. I can't see any of that. I can't control whether you have a subconscious bias against me, or if I have, a subconscious bias against a certain person or whatever. I can just do the best I can every single day to give into my process, to perfect my process. And to those saying, again, to just say this, I don't care about making the best podcast. I've never been concerned about making the best podcast ever. What I'm concerned about is making the best podcaster, because what I'm doing here with basketball, I could do with relationship advice. I could do with financial advice. I could do with philosophy. I can do with educational advice. Literally, there's no limit. I could do it with film. I could do it with entrepreneurship. Shit, man, I could start 6 podcasts tomorrow, and they would all be probably just as successful as this, and probably pay a little bit more. The end result is not making the greatest basketball podcast. And the end result is actually trying to make the best podcaster, the best public speaker that I can. You ever notice like how much keynote speakers make at big events? Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do here. So this is my process. I wanted to share a little bit about it with you. I want to extend a very big thank you to the person who wrote what they wrote to me. It was very meaningful. I don't think that people ever stop to realize how much the community, what you guys do back, matters. From the super chats, from the likes, from the shares, from the public defense on Twitter, all of these things are very meaningful to me as this apparently cyborg non-feeling thing. I promise I do feel gratitude. This is one emotion I do feel heavily. So thank you all for that. I hope this podcast was informative. I hope that it was good. I hope that it lived up to its billing in the opening act. And I'm just happy that I'm doing something when I'm not half asleep. All right. We have another super chat. Happy early birthday, buy a scratch ticket. Thanks a lot, Sean. I appreciate it. I hope you don't mind. I probably will not buy a scratch ticket, but Carbon saying the key, provide your best content, honest and transparent. Yep, I agree. I wouldn't bet on that, but okay. Is this because of the door-to-door salesman thing? Use it, man. I used to sell car wax for a few months door to door. Literally happened to me. I used to talk to old people because they weren't rude. That's exactly it. Yeah. Good night, sir. Thank you. Who is Magnet? Got my lovely lady sleeping, was having a smoke, and thought I'd say hi. You guys are all awesome. Thanks for the early birthday wishes. Going to be 40. It's a big one. Good night, y'all. Thanks. Happy early birthday, Magnet. No, his first name was Bernardo. Although I will say that Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. Oh, you're back. Oh, thank you for coming. I'm so happy you came, just so I can block you and delete you. I've read a lot of your comments in other Raptor places. You are absolutely not welcome here, sir. To the Paul Bernardo thing, it was actually very scary. I remember when we moved here, I believe when we moved to Canada, we moved to Scarborough, and that was a really, really big talking point at the time. So I remember feeling very scared of these two people. Yeah, people who abuse children are scum, and quite frankly, yeah, very scary. My birthday is the same as Kobe. Remarkable coincidence. All right. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. To have 100, almost 90 people at like 4 a.m. is really a testament to how global our audience is. But also, I see a lot of people who are clearly up on Canada time right now as well. To all of you, I say, I hope you get some sleep really soon. Man, I tell you, I've been so sleep deprived for so long that I don't even know, like, sometimes you get to a neutral where you don't even know how you function on a normal level. I slept for 10 hours today. It is one of the best decisions I've made in a long time. And I hope that that reflected in this podcast as well. And I will, I don't know how I'm going to do tomorrow's podcast because now my sleep schedule is a little bit messed up. And then the Raptors play late. So maybe I'll catch an afternoon nap. But yeah, it was a good decision. All right. Take care, guys. Have a great one. And Sean, thanks so much for the super chats. Really appreciate it, man. Summer Low, what's the most influential philosophy you've read? Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Hume. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sean. Take care, guys. Have a good one. And good night. Actually, good morning. But yeah, good morning to anyone who watches this. Make sure to hit like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. Peace.